All right, Job chapter 25. Let's call this one Chipping Away No More. A final insult in this chapter where Bildad is going to respond to Job by saying, God is great. His dominion is mighty. Who can number his armies? And can anyone hide from his light? Therefore, he's going to go back to the redundancy we mentioned before by stealing a phrase that essentially goes, can anyone be right before him? Moreover, even the moon is not bright before him, and the stars are not pure. How much less a man who is more likened unto a worm or a maggot, as he concludes this relatively brief but insult-filled final response to Job, which, even though it's short, is going to seem to implicate spin in possibly three ways, two belonging to Bildad and one we've seen before from Eliphaz. First of all, Bildad is going to spin the issue, understanding that at the end of the last chapter, Job had challenged his friends to prove him wrong, that the wicked often die in the same way as the righteous. Bildad, however, is going to avoid that issue, sidestep it, and basically talk about God again generally before going on to essentially call Job a worm or a maggot, understanding that he is once again generally talking about mankind, but it seems that, as his friends have done before, Job is the worm or maggot that they're saying couldn't possibly be right before God now and is therefore the reason for his own suffering. Understanding that first spin is, instead of offering up an answer to Job's question, he simply goes schoolyard and offers up an insult, which is essentially another form of an ad hominem attack, something we mentioned in the previous set of lessons, which is, again, a style of response that avoids the issue by personally attacking the individual you're discussing with, which reminded me of Eliphaz's last response to Job, in which he spun Job's words, meaning he used something similar to what Job said to take his meaning in a completely different direction. Bildad is going to do something similar here, except he is going to literally quote Job, but he is going to spin ownership of Job's words to basically act like they are his. And this is not the first time we've seen it. But the fact that the final response from one of Job's friends is going to include in verse 4, how then can man be in the right before God? As almost a literal quote of what Job said back in chapter 9, verse 2, when he says, truly I know that it is so, but how can a man be in the right before God? Could be interpreted in a few ways, two of which maybe, as Eliphaz, I think it was Eliphaz did a few chapters ago, he could simply be using Job's words against him. The problem is, Eliphaz literally said, your own words condemn you. Bildad, not so much here. He simply takes Job's words really pretty much as his own, which leaves the other obvious option. Literally, Bildad taking Job's words as his own, which seems to be what Job thinks he's doing, because by the time we get to the next chapter where Job responds, he is literally going to say in chapter 26, with whose help have you uttered these words? Which might be another way of saying, I can't imagine where you got that idea from, which motivated me to look up some interesting facts about copyright law. And the first one that popped up when I searched was the amount of America's economy copyright takes up. It is literally, as at least the Copyright Alliance says, in 2021, the core copyright industries added $1.8 trillion of value to U.S. GDP, that is gross domestic product, accounting for 7.76 of the entire U.S. economy. That means approaching 10% of the entire U.S. economy is protecting your original thoughts as yours. Understanding, as Job is learning here, people who are inclined to take your thoughts don't necessarily have to even be your fans. Understanding that the final insults from those chipping away at Job came not only in the way that they literally insulted him, but in the way that those who insulted him were eager to respin Job's thoughts as theirs.